Thank you so much for being here, and it's a pleasure to welcome each of you to Regis High School tonight. To our alumni and our alumni parents, to you I say welcome back. For those of you who are here for the first time at Regis, founded in 1914, Regis High School provides a full scholarship for Catholic young men from all around the New York metropolitan area who demonstrate superior intellectual and leadership potential. And in the admissions process, special consideration is given to those who cannot otherwise afford a Catholic education. Our 531 students come from 243 zip codes, and typically about 45% of our students have at least one parent born outside the United States, and about 40% of our students speak something other than English at home. So Regis is really a special place. And tonight is no different as we welcome two individuals to have a conversation with us. Jon Sciambi joined ESPN full-time in 2010 as the play-by-play voice of the MLB on ESPN radio, while continuing to do the same role for college basketball and Major League Baseball on ESPN, which he has done since 2005. Mr. Sciambi has been the regular play-by-play voice on Wednesday night baseball telecast for the network since the 2014 season. And he's contributed to ESPN's Radio World Series coverage as the on-site studio host since 2007, and provided post-game, on-field interviews for ESPN SportsCenter. Additionally, he had done play-by-play for both college and Little League World Series. Prior to joining ESPN, Mr. Sciambi was the lead play-by-play announcer for the Atlanta Braves on Fox Sports South and Sports South. Previously, he has served as host for 1790 The Ticket in South Florida as the voice of the Florida Marlins. Mr. Sciambi is a 1988 graduate of Regis High School and a 1992 graduate of Boston College. Mr. Rob Manfred was elected the 10th Commissioner of Major League Baseball in August 2014 and officially became the sports leader in January 2015. Mr. Manfred served as Chief Operating Officer for Major League Baseball since September 2013. In this role, Mr. Manfred managed the Commissioner's office in New York, and on behalf of Commissioner Bud Selig, he worked closely with the club ownership and management executives and had a long addressed the variety of needs of the industry's economic, governance, and policy issues. As Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Manfred oversaw labor relations, baseball operations, baseball development, finance, administration, and other key areas. Before becoming COO, Mr. Manfred served as the Major League Baseball's Executive Vice President for Economic and League Affairs. From 1998 to 2012, he was Executive Vice President for Labor Relations and Human Resources. He's a 1980 graduate of the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. In 1983, he received his law degree, magna cum laude, from Harvard Law School, where he was an articles editor for the Harvard Law Review. Following law school, Mr. Manfred clerked for a U.S. District Judge in Massachusetts, and following that clerkship, Mr. Manfred joined the Labor and Employment Law section of Morgan Lewis in Washington, D.C. He became a partner in that firm in 1992. Mr. Manfred and his wife, Colleen, have 4 children, including Mike, who is a member of the Regis High School class of 2005. And I'd like to say, I think I'm probably the last person who ever asked Mr. Manfred what he did for a living. We were having dinner in September a year ago. I had just gotten to town, and a friend of mine from Texas invited me to dinner and said that a former Regis parent was going to join us, Rob and Colleen. That's all he told me. So we had a wonderful dinner conversation talking about Regis, and another couple was from Gonzaga, and this couple from Strake Jesuit in Houston, 3 places I'd been. And so as we're nearing dessert, I turned to Rob and say, "So Rob, what do you do for a living?" In his characteristic, humble way, he said, "I work for Major League Baseball." And so he does. Please welcome our 2 guests tonight. Thank you. I'd like to make Father feel a little better. You are, in fact, not the last person. And this story's worse. I was playing golf in Florida, the club I belong to, and the way they play on Saturdays, they kind of put your foursome together, not necessarily the guys that you know. And so I played 18 holes of golf.
baseball, I think he's going, oh, why do I need to do this, right? So about 2 days later, I'm in the locker room, this guy comes running up, and he says, oh my God, I can't believe it. He said, my son works for the Yankees. I went, I swear to God, I went home and told him who I played with, and he said, I told him I didn't realize you were the commissioner of baseball. He was,
Really, we get you to put your turn your mic on, just the. Mine's on, I think.
I don't know, mine isn't.
Just the top. I know you don't get paid for the broadcasting stuff.
There we go. How about that?
All right. Where were we?
Whatever. I mean, I was in the middle of a long story. I do it again. I don't know.
It was really good for you guys back there.
Never mind.
Really
We'll go on, John. Enough of that story.
All right, so the first thing that I want to do, because I'm back here at my high school, is I want to say congratulations to the Regis soccer team for winning the city championship. Wow. Yesterday, first time in school history, and Vincent Catapano, congratulations as head coach. So proud. My slender physique belies the fact that I actually did play soccer here, and we got to the semifinals in 1988 and lost to Malloy. And yeah, that's right. So congratulations, that's what I want to start with. But I'm excited to be back here and get a chance to chat some baseball with you.
Okay.
So I know that there are a lot of baseball. I know a lot of Regis guys are big baseball fans, so there's a lot to get to. The one thing that I want to start with, if you're all right, was just personally, as a kid, who was your guy? Who was your favorite player?
Oh, that's easy. My favorite, I grew up in upstate New York. We had Yankee and Met games on cable. I'm 59,
Yep.
so we were early in the cable era. And my dad was a big Yankee fan. My first guy was Mickey Mantle. First time my parents brought us down in 1968. We drove down. I have a brother and sister who are a couple years, one older, one younger. And the five of us came down here. We stayed in Elmsford, and we went to Yankee Stadium both Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, the Yankees lost. This is Mantle's last year, right, 68. The Yankees lost to the Twins 3-2, but Mantle hit 2 home runs in a game. It turns out, one from each side, and it turns out to be the last time he ever hit 2 home runs in a game. So, I've always had a soft spot. I actually have a very nice pencil drawing of Mickey that a pretty famous artist did a lot of work around the Cal Ripken streak, did for me as a prize when I spoke one night. So I still have my Mantle thing going on.
Do you, and we'll get into game stuff, but what was your last, fist-pumping moment as a fan? Or maybe your seminal moment as a fan that you just remember really feeling it, the joy vicariously living through your team?
I have been cured of...
I have as well, but...
my original Yankee allegiance. You get cured of that when you have this job because you have to be neutral. But I think that the 2001 World Series in Yankee Stadium was really a phenomenal experience. This is actually funny. After I got elected, I had known President Bush from when he owned the Rangers, and he called and asked if I would go down and do a fundraiser at the Bush Library, and I didn't really know what this was all about. So I get down there, and he says to me, so the way this is going to work is I'm going to interview you. And I'm thinking, really? This is, I'm not sure I'm up for this, but, he's pretty insistent, so he's going to do this interview. And he asked me in the interview whether I collect. And I swear to you this is true. The only thing I have ever saved in all the years in baseball, and you know, people give you autograph stuff and you come into possession of it. Most of it I give away to let people auction it off at charities. The only thing I've ever kept, President Bush signed 12 baseballs the night that he threw the first pitch out in Yankee Stadium in '01. And so he asked me this question, and I answered. I said, the only memorabilia I have, and I described the baseball. Nobody in the whole place believed it was true. I think they all thought I made it up to pander to President Bush, but it actually is true.
We just came off a great postseason. As a postseason progresses, as a commissioner, what are you hoping for? What do you, when you're watching, what do you want?
7 games. I mean, you know, we actually joke.
I mean, that is straight up lie detector stuff there.
You want 7 games. You know, it makes a huge difference in terms of it's not really about money. I mean, most of our money is the same. You know, you're getting paid for the World Series by your broadcaster. It's a fixed payment. It doesn't increase based on the number of games. What it really is 7 games dramatically increases the interest that builds in the series as you go along. And it's, you know, it's kind of a joke in the industry. After one team gets ahead, right, you often say to the owner of the other team, well, tonight you're ahead. I'm rooting for the other guy tonight, just so that we even it up and get to 7. And, you know, we've been really lucky the last 2 years, 2 phenomenal 7-game series.
Yeah, big time. Let's get into some of the things happening inside the game right now because, I mean, look, ratings for the World Series were outstanding. I want to get into some of the technology stuff, but on the field, I guess the first thing that I think about is style, and that home run rate is a big thing. And the 3 true outcomes are so prevalent now, more so than ever, so that, you know, 42% of runs were scored on the home run this year. That's the highest rate ever. About 30% of all plate appearances end in strikeout or walk. Is that good?
You know, let me give you 2 answers to that. Our fan research actually tells us it is good. Fans like home runs.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
That's a bumper sticker.
Yeah, they do. They like home runs. You know, and I actually, you know, been a lot of conversation about the baseball and juicing and all this. It is ironic that people think that, because we went through a huge analysis of the way the game's being played on the field after I was elected. And shared it with the owners, had an entire owners meeting, which is the first time in the 20-something years I've been going to owners meetings. The entire meeting was devoted to the play of the game on the field. No business, just the whole 2 days was about what are we doing, what's changed. And Tony Petitti, who is the COO at Baseball Now, former executive producer of CBS Sports, put together a phenomenal tape comparing one of the games from the Kansas City, New York Mets World Series with the Bill Mazeroski game. And the comparisons show some really striking things in terms of number of first pitches that people swing at, number of strikeouts.
I think there were none in Game 7.
There were none in that game. You're very good, John. That's outstanding. That's really good. That is actually right. Anyways, the conclusion of this whole thing is, you know, we'd like to see more balls put in play, more action in the game, okay? Just about the time we do it, the home run rate takes off. It was exactly the opposite of what we were pitching in terms of how we would like to see the game evolve. I think in the last couple of years, what we've come to realize is there's something organic about our sport. It goes through cycles. And trying to alter those cycles, you're swimming against a tide that is really, really strong. Trying to figure out rule changes that might alter those cycles, probably not a productive activity. I think the way that the game will evolve is people will figure out a way to win that doesn't involve quite as many home runs, and then you'll see the game go in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good athletes right now, and so the only thing that I would say is that at times, when the ball is not being put in play, you have so many guys who can run, who can throw, and when the ball is not put in play, those skills are not on display.
You're right about that, and that's why, we were thinking about, in terms of entertainment value, it's really great to have those skills on display. But I think you've actually started to see it. You saw it some in the postseason with guys bunting against the shift, or just visibly trying to go the other way against the shift. And that's the game beginning to respond to,
Yeah, adjusting to the adjustment.
Right, right.
As far as we hear about time of game and pace of play being intertwined, but I don't know that it's necessarily the same thing. I think everybody's been to a game where you have a 3-hour game that felt like a 3-hour and 30-minute game, and you have a 3-hour game that feels like a 2.5-hour game. Just there's a feel and a vibe to it. So give me those two ideas as far as pace of play and time of game.
Yeah, we try to talk only about pace of play.
Yeah.
Time of game is largely determined by the number of pitches thrown in a game, and you're not going to control that. There's no way to, how much offense you have, how many pitches gets thrown. That's what determines the time of the game. Pace of game, we see that concept is capturing what we think of as the problem of dead time. So dead time, what does that mean? Pitchers throw, on average, 300 pitches in a major league game. If the pitcher works quickly, it dramatically alters the pace of the game. That's why we've been so interested in a pitch clock. The other dead time issues that we're focused on, mound visits. Mound visits are a really complicated thing. They have increased dramatically. And interestingly, one of the reasons they've increased dramatically is instant replay. When we designed instant replay, we concluded that we had to have video capability behind both dugouts and controlled by Major League Baseball. And why do we do that? We thought that if we didn't have equal video access, the home team would have, 1080 screens with the best TVs, and on the visitor side, it would be a 22-inch Panasonic from 1968, right? So we decided we need to control it. So what happened with that? The availability of that video equipment proximate to the dugout created this temptation to escalate the naturally occurring process of stealing signs. People catch on when you're stealing signs, and they undertake activities to try to prevent you from stealing signs, the most common of which is mound visits. So, we've got a complicated problem there. Those mound visits are really slow the game down.
Do you want me to make the Apple Watch joke now or later?
Yeah, it's the only thing it's good for, right? I know.
Sorry.
But, mound visits are another example of that time. You look, you have unintended consequences. Clubs, in an effort to deal with slow points in the game, get into this whole thing of walk-up music, entertainment in the ballpark. Well, what is walk-up music evolved into? Now nobody walks up until their music's over. The idea was to fill the void.
The gap, right?
And now they wait there until the music's over because they want to
hear my song.
Apparently want to hear the whole song. So it's just, it's a complicated process of dealing with those times where there's no dead time defined, no action in the game, and taking it out has no competitive impact on the outcome of the game.
Pitch clock, something that...
Love the pitch clock idea. I'll tell you, this is great. So, at the time that we start thinking about this, LaRussa's still on my staff. He hasn't gone to Arizona yet. And, Joe Torre's still there, obviously. So I got some pretty traditional baseball guys in the room, and some of my younger, more analytical guys were sitting around, and we're talking about pace of game. And I said, look, I'm done messing around with this, 1 foot in the box and, 19 exceptions when you can step out of the box and everything. We just need a clock. And there's like this silence. And like the older guys are like, wow, you can't be serious, right? I said, what do you mean? Well, we're the game with no clock. I said, yeah, I'm aware of that. I said, but, we have sort of an issue here. So what we decided to do is, I retreat at that point, right? I'm thinking I got Joe Torre and Tony La Russa on one side, me on the other. It's an on-field issue. I gotta have a plan here to figure out how I'm going to get these guys, right? So we decide that in the Arizona Fall League, which for those of you who don't know is a league that we run, it's kind of a hothouse league in the fall, as you might guess from the name, and it's really players that are going to have their first substantial big league experience the next year. So it's pretty high quality play. We put the clock in the fall league, and we schedule the general managers meeting, which is the biggest baseball operations meeting of the year, in Phoenix while the Arizona Fall League is going on. And one of the nights, instead of your standard dinner, whatever, we take them all to an Arizona Fall League game, and they see a game played with this pitch clock. So they come back from the meetings, and I get both Joe and Tony show up. Unbelievable. It's an entirely different feel to the game. It's more like the game we played.
Right.
So, when you talk about change in baseball, you always need to try to find that sweet spot between change on the one hand and history and tradition on the other. And when you can make a change that is consistent with your goals, and yet it harkens back to an era that people are nostalgic about, that's kind of the sweet spot. So I think the clock can be that.
I talked to Tony Clark about it, and while understanding that he needs to be an advocate for the players, the biggest thing that I believe is that players will do what they always do, and that is adjust. They'll be fine. The other thing is, I don't know whether you saw, there was an article in SB Nation right at the beginning of this season. I know we got some people in here that are hardcore that probably saw it. But what they did was they found a game from, I want to say, within the last couple of years, and then a game from 30 years ago. And all of the markers were the same, meaning score, hits, pitches thrown. Within everything, exactly the same. And the difference in time of game was 33 minutes. They filtered out all the commercials and everything, and they sat there and searched, okay, so why? Play faster.
Yeah.
Like, that was really it. Play faster.
Well,
and there's something that's been cultivated in terms of the habits, where these guys just, play a little slower.
Yeah, I think your first point, John, is really the most important one. 60% of the guys that are in the big leagues this year have played minor league baseball with.
So they played with a clock.
With a pitch clock, right. So they played in the minor leagues well enough to get to the big leagues, right? They're going to adjust. But there is the other side of this. Is actually, I think it's funny. Maybe you guys will too. So I'm in the booth at Wrigley during the regular season. I was on a club visit, and I often do home and visit radio for half an inning, and I end up in the booth with Jim Deshaies, who was a pretty accomplished major league pitcher. In a small world story, I spent 2 years at Lemoyne.
He went to Lemoyne.
He did. He was on a staff at Lemoyne, believe it or not. Tom Browning, Jim Deshaies, and a third guy that went to AAA in the Expos organization were all on the same Lemoyne team. They actually went to they played Division I baseball at the time and went to the NCAA tournament. Anyways, Jim is from Messina, New York, which is, I have some family from there, so we have a lot in common. We were actually there at the same time. So I'm doing this radio inning with Jim, and you never know, as you know with radio, what somebody's going to say, right? So Jim turns to me, and we're talking about these issues, and he says, the problem, Rob, that you have is you're talking to the wrong people about pace of game. So I'm thinking, what the hell is he? I can't figure out what he's telling me, right? So I do the only thing I can think of to do, say, well, what do you mean, Jim? He says, well, you're talking to players. And I said, now I really don't know what I'm going to say in response to this because, I got to make a deal with these players.
Sure.
I don't, So Jim says, so I said, well, what do you mean, Jim? And he says, well, big league players, if you think about it, they have achieved everything, the only thing for a lot of them that they've ever aspired to in their relatively short lives, right? It's the pinnacle. You made it to the big leagues. And he said the thought process is anything you change might be the one thing that makes me not be a major league player anymore. And so they're going to be your toughest audience in terms of convincing people for change. So, we try to manage that. He's right. We try to manage that, and one of the things we've done is use the minor leagues as sort of an experiment to try to get players comfortable with the idea they can play, they can adjust, and they can get used to these different rules.
I get a couple other things on replay umpires, but I wanted to touch on something that just popped into my head that I think is interesting, and I'm really curious as to your perspective on it, and that is emotion in the game. Because this postseason, I felt the emotion that was on display was overt, and I felt it was more accepted. I mean, we're 2 years removed from Jose Bautista and a bat flip that almost had like a federal inquiry. And Jock Peterson's going around third saying, pay me my money, and everybody's kind of like, yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
Come on, fun hater.
let me tell you a little bit about that. A couple of thoughts. It is another example of the game evolving, right? And what I've been saying about this publicly is that the game has always been governed on the field by unwritten rules.
Yeah.
They're unwritten rules that players set and enforce. Right? I mean, this whole unwritten, and what you're starting to see is that our game is about young players right now. It's all about young players. And in case you've missed the memo, young people are different. They are different than the generation before them, as it should be. And I think what you're seeing is that natural process of young players redefining unwritten rules. Now, our view of that is that they will draw the lines at places that will keep even whoever had to scream from the back of the room happy with what goes on the field in most cases, because even our young players, tremendous respect for the game. However, we also think that there is an advantage. We think that emotion is extremely attractive to a younger audience. Probably the best evidence of that, I think the most emotion you've probably seen in any baseball game in recent years were the games during the WBC, because you have that added fuel of nationalism.
And it's great, isn't it?
It's fantastic. But the interesting thing about those broadcasts is the demographics of our broadcast during the WBC dramatically different than our normal broadcast audience. Decades younger on average, and far more diverse than our normal viewing audience. When you sit where I sit, those are things that you're interested in promoting in terms of the future health of the game.
Yeah, that's interesting in terms of the demographics and the WBC. Is that something? Do you see the WBC? I know that, here we have I think we have a tendency, because fans of the U.S. until this year aren't quite as interested, and the other countries are. So just because we're not doesn't mean it's not important. Is one of the points that I make.
I am 100% committed to the idea that the WBC is important to the growth of the sport. That commitment comes despite the fact that baseball operations people hate it.
Yeah.
No general manager or field manager wants Jon Sciambi, my star second baseman. Oh my God, I have to turn him loose to play for Jim Leland. I mean, Come on, you know, I mean.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be all right, right. But, you know, they don't like it because it's a loss of control. Having said that, I went to Korea, I went to Japan this year. Those games, I mean, when you go to a game in Korea and Israel-Korea is sold out, you know you have something, okay? I mean, you really do. And I think we really turned the corner in the U.S. this year. The games in Miami, absolutely phenomenal.
Yep.
The finals in L.A., absolutely phenomenal. I just think it's taken some time for fans to get used to the idea that, you know, this is something different than and believe me, I'm a huge fan of this as well. It's different to go see, you know, the Cardinals and the Astros at Roger Dean Stadium during spring training. That's one thing. It's kind of fun, right? Little different, a lot of intimacy. That's very different than go and watch the U.S. and the Dominican in Marlins Stadium. Okay,
Yep.
Those are different entertainment products, and I think our fans this time around, particularly with the U.S. team playing so well, we started to turn the corner in terms of people appreciating that product.
I get a chance to do the WBC in one of the rounds in Tokyo a few years back. So this is going to seem like it's out of left field, but I think you'll pick up on it. If I hooked you up to a lie detector, as far as the WBC, would your fantasy be to eventually get a major league player from China and the growth of the sport somewhere moving in that direction?
Yeah, China's a really important project for us. We actually own and operate 2 schools that are full-service schools in China where parents, you know, your child has to be admitted, it's competitive, but you essentially go there to learn to be a baseball player. That's what it's about. And, you know, there's a full educational program followed by a full baseball program in the afternoon. We decided that we were to the point in China in the last couple of years where we started to dump content in there via the internet. We have a partnership with a company called Le Sport, a lot of games available. The same company also has a online retail business. They have something that looks parallel to what you get in the MLB.com shop, except it's all language appropriate. And then this year, sometimes you wish you bring your AV materials with you. I actually have pictures. We made because we're involved in education, we developed some contacts in the education ministry. There are 2 broadcast outlets in China. One of the 2 is broadcast into every elementary school in China, and they carried the World Series games in the schools in China. And I have these great pictures of all these great Chinese kids watching the World Series, which is, you know, that's how you grow the game. But, you know, China's a huge issue for us. I thought you were going to ask me something different. The worst loss of all time is losing to the Japanese in the WBC. I mean, it's the one place where we openly root for the United States.
Right.
And both times they won. The Dominican was not so bad. The Japanese would not be in the category of gracious winners. They like winning, and they're not too shy about it, which is great. You know, it's a good thing.
Let's bounce around a little bit. In the next 5 years, we still have plate umpires.
Oh, absolutely. Look, people are confused by the technology and the false precision associated with the box that you see during broadcast. So let me explain to you what happens there. So we collect data from an in-house system that we provide to broadcasters. There are 3 renderings of that data done. What you see in the broadcast is the first rendering, okay? That is so inaccurate that we use it for no purpose other than to put it in broadcast. 2 additional renderings are done. Serious. 2 additional renderings are done until we get to the data that's actually used to evaluate umpires. And there are significant differences between those renderings. So why do I tell you that? What that means is, even with all the money that we have spent on this technology, We do not have the capacity to determine balls and strikes quickly enough to replace a home plate umpire. With all due respect to Eric Burns, who actually works for me, you know, the idea that...
Yeah, I saw the piece that he did with Sport Vision. Fair enough.
Look, you can be a nice man and still be wrong. You
Yes.
know, I mean, he just happens to be wrong. You know, good employee, nice man, wrong. I mean, it is what it is.
That line is so stolen. You can be a nice man and be wrong. It's
Right.
tremendous.
So, you know, I think the point is we're a long way away on the technology. The second point's this. You know, home plate umpires run the game, right? I mean, they
No doubt.
effectively are Major League Baseball's frontline supervisors. They run the game. And it's kind of management 101. One of the things that gives them the authority to run the game is that they have control over what is a ball and what is a strike. And the players perceive, whether this is accurate or not, that they will use that ability to determine what's a ball and a strike in order to control the game. And when you take that role away from the home plate umpire, you, by definition, right, I think almost beyond debate, reduce his authority on the field. I'm not sure we're quite ready for that.
All right, I'm going to ask you, what do you dislike about replay? But before I ask you that, I'm going to tell you what I dislike about replay, and it's totally selfish.
Okay?
The communication to the fans and to the broadcasters, and thus the audience, is terrible as it relates to challenging. Specifically, if you're a fan, you can infer. I did a Yankee-Red Sox game at Fenway Park this year that because of a number of circumstances where Farrell and Girardi went back and forth, the game stopped for almost 10 minutes, and we didn't actually know what Girardi was so upset about or any of that. And I just think at times the umps their focus is to get it right, and I appreciate that, but the games aren't played in a vacuum. The stadiums aren't empty.
Okay, so let's start with what I like.
I feel so much better now. I've been holding on to that one for a long time. Sorry.
You know, there's one reporter that shall remain nameless that every time I have a press conference, he's there. And at least once during the press conference, you tempted to say to him, was that a speech or a question?
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
That's right.
But we'll bear with you on this.
Yeah,
It's
no.
a conversation.
It was a speech,
So
I
look,
know.
what do I like about it? I think that replay is responsive to a very fundamental fan desire that we use technology to get significant, obviously incorrect calls correct, okay? That's why we did it. And I do like that. I think that the application of the technology to the game has been a positive. What do I don't like about it? The number one thing I don't like about it, and we continue to work on it, we worked on it with the 30 seconds that the manager has to decide whether to challenge and the soft 2-minute limit in the replay room. What I don't like about it is the delay. I mean, it's just another, okay, my own phrase, dead time in the game. The issue that you raise about what's going on in the ballpark is a real problem. Umpires are reluctant to get on a PA system themselves. And I understand that because it is possible. I mean, it happens all the time. When they get on the set, they learn something that if they speak before they're on the headset, they might be wrong. And that's a huge problem for them. Another, undermining of authority in terms of their certainty about the rules. In order to combat that, we do make available an explanation to broadcasters and to stadium operations personnel that can be put on the board, the challenges of the slide rule at second base. It happened during the World Series. We're like, why are they, we're sitting in a suite watching on TV. He was obviously out. Why are they challenging that call? It was the slide rule. It wasn't the safer out thing. It was whether the slide rule had been applied correctly. So for some reason, we have not gotten good utilization of that information, either from stadium operations personnel better from broadcasters, but not perfect, and it's something we're really working on during the offseason.
I still think it needs to be front of mind. I did the first game of the year this year on ESPN. It was the Yankees and the Rays. That game started 4 minutes late because the Yankees had an issue with video replay. But we had no idea
That's
why the game was being delayed. And
Yeah.
I just...
Look, let me be clear about this. What I tried to say in response to this is we realize what you point out is a problem,
Yeah.
and we're working on it.
What is the best part of your job?
Oh, the best part of my job is the Play Ball initiative. 100%, blow you away. As much as I love going to Major League games, I will tell you, we made baseball, the entire time I had worked there, had a minuscule investment in youth participation, which is like not investing in research and development. It stunts your future. Hats off to the Players Association. We had about, we had this tax money, that we collect in order to incent and disincent various kinds of behavior. And, sometimes the taxes weren't that effective in terms of limiting the behavior, and as a result, a lot of money kind of got trapped in Central Baseball. And it was jointly controlled. Went to the union and said, hey, look, we got a great idea. It's not all the money, but, give me $30 million and let me show you what I can do in the youth space. And it has been phenomenal. We've made a great partnership with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I went out and gave a speech in San Francisco 3 summers ago, and it was a 5-minute, uninspiring discussion. And at the end of it, I had 190 pledges from mayors to conduct play ball community events within the next month in their individual cities. 220 were delivered against. So they pledged 190 of them. I got 30 more that picked up. We've grown that number each year. They are simple, community-based events to introduce people to the game, show kids that you can play the game the way I'm sure you did and the way I did. Not always with 18 kids in uniform, umpires, screaming parents, but little simple games that are still baseball generically defined. Great partnership with Little League Baseball. Steve Keener is like the Pied Piper of youth baseball, the president of Little League. I know you know him. I'll tell you a great story about Steve. We took Steve to Cuba with us, and I don't even know, I had just seen him, and we had a certain number of people we could take in, and I said, do you want to go? He said, oh, I'm all over that. So Steve goes to Cuba, and it was a really interesting episode for baseball. Business-wise, I can't say it was a huge success for us, partially because, the administration's approach on Cuba changed a little bit, and we've had a hard time getting continuous traction. But I ran into Steve this summer in Washington at a conference, and we both spoke, and we're kind of leaving at the same time. I got a meeting with a club, and I said, where are you going? He says, I'm going to the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which is the group in Washington that regulates what goes on in Cuba. I said, why are you going there? He said, I made a deal in Cuba. I'm going to have 120 Little Leagues in Cuba next year. Unbelievable, right? Just absolutely unbelievable. And, so important to our sport in Cuba, which is a country with a great baseball culture, obviously. But, one of the things that's happened is Cuba opened under the Obama administration without and I don't mean this as a political statement, without sort of clear regulation as to what should go on. Baseball went in, our guys went in, and anybody who ever wore a pair of cleats, we signed. We essentially stripped the land. And it's really important to have some organization like Little League Baseball in Cuba, making sure that baseball remains an important part of that culture. Interacting with kids like that, I'll tell you that, I know you've done the Little League World Series. The game that we played, I love this story, so you're going to have to bear with me. A year ago, one of the first things I did after I was elected is I went to the Little League World Series. It was the Monet Davis year. No commissioner had ever been there. I didn't realize till I got there. I am the first commissioner that played Little League believe it or not. That's kind of shocking.
Really?
Yeah, I'm the first one. So Steve Keener's so on the ball. He has my 1968 Mesa #2 Little League roster from his files that he frames and presents, right? So I'm thinking, I love this guy. You know, I mean, how good is this guy? So we have sort of made it an annual event. So last summer, a year ago when we went, Tony Petiti, who I mentioned before, we had just come off the Fort Bragg game, and he says, I need to show you something while we're in Williamsport. So he takes me over to Bowman Field, which is the oldest, it's in Williamsport, it is the oldest active minor league stadium. And I'm telling you, this place was horrible. I mean, it was an embarrassment. I mean, the field was bad. The clubhouses were, you know, worse than a high school gym, okay? I mean, a terrible facility. And he says, you know, what I'd like to do is I think we can fix this place up. We can expand the seating, and we can play a major league game here. So I said, Tony, I said, you've lost your mind. I mean, there's no way. I mean, wow. There is no way that this is going to happen. So, but, you know, I said, you want to do this, you know, you got to get me a budget. You got to figure out, you know, what it's going to cost, how we're going to pay for it. So he comes back a month later. It's like a $5 million fix. And, you know, we get some money out of the Players Association Fund. The state of Pennsylvania kicks in some dough. All of a sudden, you know, we're kind of looking at like, you know, maybe we could make this work. We figure out that we can't sell tickets, but we could get every kid and their family into the game, okay? For every kid from the League World Series into the game. So they go in, and, you know, I'm getting these, you know, bi-weekly renovation updates. Then all of a sudden I start thinking this may really happen because I'm hearing from the minor league owner who is getting this renovation for free, and all of a sudden he's my new best friend. You know, I mean, he thinks I'm the greatest thing in the world, right? So, you know, turns out we make a deal with the Players Association, and what we do is we fly Pittsburgh and St. Louis in on during the Little League World Series. They come in on it's a Sunday. They were playing a set in Pittsburgh, so it's a nice short flight. They don't have to stay in Williamsport where your lodging options are somewhat limited. Okay, there's a good, and so we fly them in for the day, and because Little League is so organized, they actually have a Little League team ride on the bus with each of the major league teams to the stadium. So by the time I'm standing in the parking lot waiting for, you know, the buses to arrive so I can thank the players for what they're doing. By the time they get there, you know, each player kind of has his
best friend.
Yeah, his little gag.
I mean, I saw the videos on Instagram. It was incredible.
It was unbelievable. The Dominican team rode with the Cardinals, and Carlos Martinez must be the biggest thing ever in the Dominican Republic. These kids were going crazy over him. Andrew McCutcheon,
They bought snow cones for 300 people in the stands at one point.
Multiple players bought food for all the players in the stands. So they go and they sit and they watch a Little League game, and they stay for 5-6 innings. Like, I walked up to the stadium with Lance Lynn. There were 4 major league players who had played in the Little League World Series, including Lance Lynn. And it's like this stream. You know, I don't know Lance all that well, to tell you the truth, and he's walking along. It's like this stream coming on. I can't tell you how great it is to be back here. You know, it's just so good to be back here. And then they played at night, and it was a nice little stadium. It had that sort of spring training feel to it in terms of the intimacy. Really great.
Phillies Mets next year.
Phillies-Mets next year. You know, we're hoping I think the Little League World Series thing's a little different. We're hoping that becomes an annual event for us. We're big on the idea of taking games places that people don't ordinarily see them. That's what Fort Bragg was about. And you know, what people don't realize about Fort Bragg, you know, we built this field. The players walk out on the field. They're saying, this is better than some of the fields we play on. All of the seating and the clubhouses that were, you know, major league quality clubhouses were temporary. They're just tents. And they, you know, we brought in, set them up. The next day, all that goes away, and all of that, it was originally supposed to be 5. The government liked the project so much that they actually expanded the area they gave to us. Turns it into 10 softball fields desperately needed for the amount of play that was going on by the troops day in and day out. So it's a great give back. We have some other sites that we actually went out and.
What do you got? Let's go.
Well, I'll tell you. We've thought about trying to do something in Omaha where the College World Series is. We've talked about a major football stadium as a possibility. We actually went and looked at the Field of Dreams.
Could you do it? It'd be hard.
Well, it's can you do it? Yes. The question is how much money will you spend to do it? And it is really remote. I mean, I didn't realize. I mean, I'd never been before, and we flew.
People will come, Rob.
Yeah. You might be right. That's very good. Anyways, we've thought about places like that. No firm decision on that.
News today, and I want you to, I don't know if everybody's aware, and I know we're getting close on time here. Bob Bowman announcing that he's going to leave at the end of his contract. He's the head of BAMTech, Major League Baseball's amazing streaming service and technology company. Just explain how ahead of the curve Major League Baseball has been in that regard. Somebody wrote something today about Major League Baseball has been streaming games for way longer than the iPhone's been out. I mean, while other leagues were kind of dithering on it, you guys were very aggressive, and it's been a big reason why it's been a big revenue generator.
Yeah. Look, let me say this. Bob Bowman, a truly visionary guy in terms of the technology of providing sports entertainment to people. He went over the top with Major League Baseball games before anybody even knew what OTT was. I mean, that phrase didn't exist when we started streaming games on MLB.tv. I mean, it's literally true. Look, what he's accomplished there was phenomenal. The story kind of starts with Commissioner Seelig. He accomplished something similar to what Pete Rozelle did when he got television rights centralized. He got the teams to centralize their digital rights. We hired Bob about 17 years ago to exploit those digital rights. MLB.tv was his first big product. At Bat, the app, the most successful sports app by some zip code. Every time that Apple debuts a new product, At Bat will be one of the featured applications, and that's not by mistake. What we actually did about 2 years ago, because our streaming of games was so good and the volume of those games so large, people started to figure out, gee, I want to stream, but
Meaning other companies.
Other companies. They started to come to us and say, hey, will you stream my stuff? So like HBO Now, when it debuted, it was going to debut with the season premiere of Game of Thrones. And they were too nervous to do it with new technology of their own, so they hired what eventually became BAMTech. We split it off from Advanced Media, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But they hired, in the technology that supported HBO Now was BAMTech. So a couple of years ago, we decided, pretty fundamental business conversation. We decided what we had was a temporal technology advantage. And what do I mean by that? We were the best in class. People were coming to us to provide that service, okay? And what we realized, however, was that advantage was going to go away because the big boys, the really big boys, the Comcasts, et cetera, they were going to build their own capacity. So we knew we had a temporary advantage. Secondly, we realized that as other people entered, that service provider business was going to become commoditized, right? That's economics 101. Third thing we realized is that the real play for BAMTech was to acquire content and become a larger, over-the-top platform for sports and entertainment. What does that take? A lot of money, okay? And not really our core business. So what we decided to do is we took all of the core of our technology group and all of baseball's content, okay? We kept that in Major League Baseball Advanced Media, and then we created this separate technology company called BAMTech. BAMTech, literally what it was just technology. And we took it to market. We sold it in 2 slugs to Disney. You know, here's a number for you, and you know, one Mr. Bowman should be proud of. He delivered to each Major League club $69 million out of an investment of less than $100 million in total. So really a phenomenal story. The good news is I was down in Chelsea where Major League Baseball Advanced Media is. You know, Bob and I spent some considerable time together. I think a principal reason behind his willingness to leave is the quality of the people that he developed in that organization, and I think we're going to continue to be a real leader in that space.
Awesome. Do we want to take some questions from the audience before we finish things up? Do we have microphones? All right, so let's wait for the microphones and then. All right, here we go.
Is the MLB looking at any expansion options in less marketed areas of the United States, like the Midwest or some area like that? Because I know like a lot of teams are based west or east coast, and we don't really have too many of those teams. Is the MLB looking at that at all?
Yeah, look, I think that we see baseball as a growth business, and over the long haul, growth businesses expand. It is a fact of life that in order to support a major league franchise in the economics of the sport as they exist today, you need metropolitan areas of a certain size. I mean, you have to have a certain mass of people, given that, you know, we have a large volume of games that have to be sold locally. I mean, 81 games, a lot of games. So we'd love to get to 32 teams for a whole host of scheduling and format reasons. It would really make the sport a better entertainment product. And the trick is finding sites that over the long haul can support the economics of Major League Baseball.
Who else? Oh, there we go.
There you go. Mr. Commissioner, just to piggyback on wonderfully talking about next summer's game in Williamsport, one of the baseball men that's inspired my career works for you, Darryl Miller, and 2 of Darryl Miller's proud alumni from Compton, Dominic Smith and J.P. Crawford, will be playing in Williamsport next summer. Right. So the dots are connecting from play ball to RBI to the academies wonderfully. My question here for you is this. You mentioned your interactions with President George W. Bush. I'm sure he learned a lot from his father, and wonderfully leaders can always look back at the leaders that previously sat in their chair. Mr. Obama might have asked the same questions of President Lincoln and Mr. Clinton from presidents before him. I ask you this, looking back on the commissioners that have sat before you, I have one, Ken Burns, we learned a lot about in 1994. I was 14 years old fan. The strike hit me hard. Lost a lot of my friends. They didn't come back. But I learned the story of a man named Miller and Curt Flood. If you could today impart some of your wisdom and your knowledge base in your career in labor relations to Commissioner Kuhn, who might not have sat on the right side of history.
Wow.
Mr. Curt Flood, as we know, paved the way not only for Ken Griffey Jr., but look forward to LeBron James. What would you tell your predecessor if you could talk to Bowie Kuhn 35, 40 years ago?
Before you do that, I just would like to say, welcome to Regis High School.
Let me answer that one this way. I think that a principal reason for the resurgence of baseball in the years after 2000. Let me pick a year. And, you know, our business has grown dramatically. And there's a lot of reasons, the technology we just talked about. But I think probably the driving force in that growth was baseball's ability to alter its approach to labor relations. And there were lots of parts to that. Part of it was hiring a sort of stable, in-house labor relations group that built a relationship with the MLB, a positive relationship with the MLBPA over time. You know, when I took the labor job in 1998, you know, I was a partner in a pretty good law firm. I had a nice life in Washington. People thought I was out of my mind. Nobody had ever lasted more than 5 years in that job, ever, in the history of baseball. And that that is it's not that I lasted and other people didn't.
It changed.
Yeah, it changed. The approach changed. The second thing that changed is the mentality of ownership. We had a tremendous turnover in the ownership of franchises, and the newer group had a much greater appreciation for the fact that the players are not just your employees. The players are also your product. So when you fight with your players publicly, and I'm not saying there aren't situations when it has to happen. You know, God knows I've had my own moments with at least individual players. But when you fight with your players in the public, you degrade your product. And that realization produces a different approach to labor relations. It forces people to be more creative in the bargaining process in order to avoid work stoppages. And it creates a greater appreciation of what the downside of a work stoppage is. I mean, the only blip since I started in baseball in 1998 we ever had in terms of our growth was the damage that was caused by that strike. And that strike actually had, the only positive to come out from it is there were at least two of us, Mike Weiner and me, who learned a lot of lessons from that and helped change the approach, you know, to labor relations on both sides. You know, the early years with Bowie was not a one-way street. You know, Marvin Miller was a great man. He was a smart man. He was a great labor guy. The fact of the matter is, his approach to labor relations was less than ideal as well.
Couple more. All right, there we go.
First, thank you both for being here. This is a really interesting discussion. My question for the commissioner is this year we had a particular World Series game that was pretty wild. 25 runs were scored, countless lead changes, 3 three-run home runs. This game started after 8 o'clock in the evening, and it didn't end until close to 2 a.m. Eastern. And I'm wondering how concerned you are about what that means for younger fans who might have watched this game if they were even able to stay up for the first 3 innings. And this is a game that could probably make them a fan for life. They're never going to forget where they were when they saw this insane game, even if it's kind of poor baseball.
You know, let me say 3 things about that. You know, first, you know, everything in life's about perspective. And, you know, East Coast people tend to forget that an 8 o'clock game in LA is a 5:08 game. LA was in the World Series. And in order to give you the 4 o'clock start that you may want, you're telling Dodger fans who supported that team all year long, oh, by the way, don't go to work today. Our game's at 1, okay? I think that, yeah, well, okay, and Sundays, in case you have missed this, there's another sport that plays Sunday that dramatically limits the available broadcast opportunities. But that's a perspective issue that applies with a West Coast World Series, number 1. Number 2, everything we do in terms of scheduling games is directed at securing the largest possible audience that we can get for those games. And contrary to popular belief, we get paid the same thing from Fox, whether they get an 8 rating or they get an 18 rating. It's a fixed dollar deal, okay? Our interest in the largest possible audience is driven by our desire to have the largest possible promotion of our jewel events. We want as many people watching the World Series as we can. Number 3, we provide more daytime postseason games than any other sport, right? All through the early rounds, we played a lot of games at 1 o'clock, right, in the division series. Interesting thing, when you watch those games, 2 demographic points. Number 1, during the World Series, our best half hour for people between the age of 8 and 14 is 10 to 10:30. Okay, that's what the data shows.
Say that again?
The best half hour for people under the age of 14, it's essentially 8 to 14, is between 10 and 10:30. Not what people believe, that happens to be the fact. And when we play earlier, like we do during the division series, we don't attract a significantly larger young audience. So I understand the sort of intuitive appeal to the argument that you make, and nobody's more concerned about young people watching the game than I am, but the demographics don't support the idea that game times actually helps with young people. We got to do it other ways. There's other things we have to be doing.
A couple others. Who has the mic?
Mm-hmm. Right. Listen, I don't want to wreck your day, but Obama's not president anymore. I know that's a jarring thought for many of you, but he isn't. I
got nothing for you on that.
Yeah. Our most fundamental objective with respect to Cuba has been to get to a reform of the immigration laws and baseball's rules through an agreement with the Cuban government that would allow Cubans to come here, try to play, or successfully play, quite frankly, and then return to Cuba. They can't do that right now. We thought we had, one of the reasons we agreed to go to Cuba was, it was a nice opportunity, number one. There was there were negative economics in it for us. It cost us money to do, but we did it in an effort to move forward the conversations that were ongoing four ways between the union, us, the U.S. government, and the Cuban government, with our goal being, let the Cubans who want to sign, let them come here and just let them go back, either when they're done playing or, during the off season. It's been difficult, and it's gotten, unfortunately, there's been kind of silent retrenchment on the opening of Cuba since the Trump administration took over.
All right, let's go one more.
We got a hard-pressed question in the back for you, John.
I won't ask this question to you.
What's it like when your dad comes to an event and decides to ask a question?
That's your father?
That is my father.
You did a nice job.
How you doing, Dad?
He wouldn't let me miss it.
No speeches, Dad.
I had to
There's
pay
a
my own
question.
way, though. Mr. Commissioner, I'm going to embarrass my son. No, you talked before about pace of game etc. And the clock is always the one that it comes out. However, let's take the change of pitchers. How many pitches does a relief pitcher throw in the pen before he comes out, and then he has to throw 8 more? Come on, I was a catcher. You know, no, he didn't need to throw 8 more. But you see what?
Yeah,
is
you're
that
on-
tradition or is that a rule?
No, you know, based on, let me tell you, based on my conversations with the union, I believe, I haven't seen it, but I think there is a stone tablet somewhere that says all relief pitchers shall be entitled to 8 warm-up pitches. This is honestly, I have to tell you, it's a great question. It's one of my pet peeves. I mean, we've gone through this. The mounds in the bullpens in major league stadiums, literally, I defy you to show me any material difference. They're the same, right? I mean, they are the same. It is an issue that we're having conversations with the union about. You know, I think your son actually used a phrase before that may be the key to this whole thing, and I think you used the phrase ready to play. Some of you may know we did some, because we're trying to show that we're willing to talk about anything in order to move the game along, we did some games on the MLB Network this year with a shorter commercial format, and there was almost, you know, less commercials, right? There was almost no difference in the time of those games or the pace of those games, and the reason is that players aren't ready to play in between innings. Maybe the best, you know, we have a 90-second commercial load in a normal local game. Our average inning break is 2 minutes and 26 seconds. You got to get ready to play in order to move the game along, and I think you said it. I'm going to steal from you.
Yeah.
Okay, so there, you know. So your question got me back to your son. How about that? All right.
All right. I think we appreciate your time for coming here, and thanks everybody for coming out, and appreciate you having us. I'd love to be able to do this again with you here sometime.
You good.
Got it. You good.